Hey guys, it's Raul again, and today I'll be sharing with you some of my favorite books of all time. So I was going through some of my videos throughout the years, and I realized that I've never done a dedicated video to my favorite books of all time. I've mentioned a lot of these books throughout like videos here and there, throughout the years and everything, but I've never done anything that's dedicated to my favorites of all time. So I figured that I would go ahead and share some of those with you guys today. I was going through my bookshelves and everything and realized that I have a lot of favorite books of all time. Some of these I feel like may not be the typical favorites of all time that you see on BookTube. You know, you see a lot of people mention Harry Potter and that kind of thing, and I didn't grow up reading the Harry Potter series. I did read it when I was younger in like middle school-ish or whatever, but it wasn't a favorite of all time. I didn't grow up on Harry Potter, so you're not going to see Harry Potter on this list. But yeah, I mean, again, I've mentioned a couple of these on my channel here and there in some of these videos. Some of these are going to be repetitive, some of these may be new to you, so yeah, let's just go ahead and get started because there are quite a few on this list. So the first book on this list is the one that I have probably mentioned the most on my channel, and a lot of you guys that have been watching my videos for a while probably already know what this is, and that is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I absolutely adore this novel. I read this my senior year of high school and absolutely fell in love with this kind of storytelling. It follows the Buendia family in the town of Macondo throughout multiple generations. So it's a generational family saga. I absolutely love it. It's absolutely beautiful. I have yet to reread this one since I read it in high school, and I've been wanting to for a while now. I have the Spanish and the English version of this book, and every year I tell myself that I'm going to reread this one, and then I always end up getting caught up reading other things, and then I never end up rereading it. So let's see. Hopefully this year will be the year that I finally end up rereading 100 Years of Solitude. And I'll probably end up like reviewing it again, you know, as I'm rereading it, what, like 20 years later. And then another favorite of all time is another one that I feel like I've mentioned a couple of times before, and that's Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. It follows our main character, Pip, as he comes into some wealth and goes off to England to kind of, you know, pursue this new life for himself. Great Expectations, again, it's a classic. A lot of people know, you know, have read it, know what it's about, know the themes and everything throughout it. I absolutely fell in love with it when I read this a few years ago in college, and yes, it has been on my list of favorites ever since. Another one that I have yet to reread, but definitely want to try and reread at some point in the next couple of years. And the next book on my list of favorites is A Million Junes by Emily Henry. Something by Emily Henry had to make this list in some way, so I decided to put the first book that I have ever read by Emily Henry, A Million Junes. I've done a full spoiler-free review, which I will link on the screen if you guys want more of my thoughts, but I thought this novel was absolutely beautiful. It follows the main character, June, as she's kind of coping with the death of her father. It deals a lot with, you know, those family dynamics, that relationship between her and her father as she's going back and kind of revisiting those memories that she has with her father. And then at the same time, you kind of have this like Romeo and Juliet type storyline where she ends up falling in love with a boy from the like a rival family, or a family that her father told her never to kind of get involved with. So yeah, she's getting involved with this other boy that she's not supposed to fall in love with, and then she's, you know, kind of trying to deal with these memories of her father and the loss and grief and everything. Again, absolutely beautiful novel. Had to have something by Emily Henry on this list. I mean, I could put multiple books by Emily Henry on this list, but I had to pick one. And the next book on this list is one that I haven't mentioned on my channel in a really long time, and that was Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock by Matthew Quick. This follows our main character, Leonard Peacock, who one day decides to go to school, kill his best friend, and then kill himself. So then you kind of have this story going back into what the events were that led up to him finally making this decision. And then, you know, if he ends up going through with it or not, everything that's going on with his head, in his head. I know this is a hit or miss novel for a lot of people, but I connected with Leonard Peacock in so many ways, and I feel like that's why this ended up being on one of my favorites, because I loved Leonard Peacock as a main character. I loved everything about this book. I mean, it's a little bit dark for a YA contemporary, but again, I thought it was absolutely beautiful, and it's been on my mind ever since. And the next book on this list is another kind of obvious one on this channel, and that is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Elizabeth Acevedo's debut novel that is written in verse, follows our main character, Xiomara, as she kind of deals with her kind of upbringing, her mom, and that kind of like the strained relationship. Her mom is very religious and very kind of like passionate about her beliefs and everything in a way where it's kind of toxic. And Xiomara's, you know, growing up in New York City and everything, and having to deal with kind of all of these things with her mom and that relationship and that strained relationship within her family and everything. I thought this was absolutely beautiful. I connected with the culture and everything throughout this one. I thought it was great. If you guys have not checked out anything by Elizabeth Acevedo, I highly recommend you checking this author out, but specifically The Poet X, because I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And the next one on this list is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, another kind of author that I love multiple books by, but I had to pick one because I wasn't, I could have easily thrown multiple books by Colleen Hoover on here, but It Ends With Us is another a book that I absolutely ended up adoring. This is, again, the first novel by Colleen Hoover that I read, kind of similar to Emily Henry. I ended up kind of picking the book that introduced me to this author, but It Ends With Us is absolutely beautiful. It tells the story of these two main characters who fall in love and have kind of this toxic, strange relationship. I went into this one fairly blindly when this book first came out. A lot of the reviews that I was seeing was telling people to go in fairly blindly and kind of experience the book for what it is. So yeah, I'm kind of doing that as well. Go into this one fairly blindly and know there are a lot of trigger warnings for abuse and domestic abuse and things like that. So if you guys are triggered by domestic abuse, definitely, go in cautiously with this one. But that's all I'm going to say about this one. I thought this was a great novel. I loved the way that it played out. I believe that it's optioned off for a movie, but things kind of are delayed a little bit right now. So I'm hoping that this ends up actually becoming a movie, because I feel like this is going to be, or this would be a very kind of powerful, important movie or story to tell, and I absolutely adored it. Now, the next book on my list of favorites of all time is Emma by Jane Austen. Another one that I had to kind of pick one book by Jane Austen because I love multiple books by her. But Emma is, hands down, I believe, my favorite one. I've watched multiple adaptations of Emma. I love Emma as a main character. I love the storyline. I love kind of her stubbornness and her just wittiness and her wanting to be independent and strong and not really fall in love and not really believe in love and want to, serve as this matchmaker for so many other people except for herself. I love this book. I love, again, the story and Emma as a main character. And yes, another one that I have been wanting to reread ever since I read it and have yet to reread it. I think I need to pick like a month or two where I'm going to reread some of these books that I've been telling myself that I'm going to reread for the longest time and throw this one on there because, again, I want to revisit this book because I read it in school a couple of years ago again, and I rushed through it because I needed to get it done before a deadline and I needed to write a paper and take a test and everything. So now that I actually have time, I feel like I'm going to enjoy it a lot more because I will be able to take my time with this one. And the next book on this list is one that I mentioned recently on my channel, and one that is, kind of leaves a bitter taste in my mouth when I mention it, but another one that at the time that I read it, I absolutely loved it, so I'm adding it to this list, and that is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. Again, I know the controversies and the things that are going on with this author. I'm not condoning them at all, but this story itself, at the time when I read it, I connected it with this main character in so many ways. Oscar Wilde was just such a great main character. He's kind of that nerdy Hispanic loner that, doesn't really have much luck with the girls and is dealing with a lot of things within himself and within his mind and his thought process and everything. And I loved him as a main character. Again, I connected with him in so many ways, and I just can't disregard the fact that I had such a great connection to this book and to this main character when I first read it, so it had to make my list of all-time favorites. The next book on this list is going to be a children's book, and that is The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I have read just The Wizard of Oz. I realized afterwards that this is, there are 5 novels in kind of like this series, and I just picked up kind of this bind-up a little while ago in hopes that I am going to, end up reading the next ones in there. But The Wizard of Oz itself, I absolutely loved. I loved the story of Dorothy and visiting Oz and all of the, this kind of like this first big adventure that she has there that, a lot of us are familiar with. I loved this world. I loved everything that kind of happened within this first one. That was my first exposure to the actual story itself, the actual book. I've seen other things or been exposed to The Wizard of Oz in other ways throughout life, but it's the first time I had read The Wizard of Oz itself a couple of years ago back in my children's lit class, and I absolutely loved it. I want everything Wizard of Oz at this point, and just it had to make my list. As soon as I was going through my bookshelves, it had to make the list. And the next one on this list of favorites is The Red Umbrella by Cristina Diaz-Gonzalez. This is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful novel. This is a middle grade novel that follows our main character, Lucia, as she is being sent away from Cuba. So it takes place in the 1960s in Cuba when Fidel Castro is first taking power and everything. And there's this thing called Project Peter Pan, that they were, the Cuban people were afraid of their children. There were rumors that the government was going to kind of take control or possession of people's children and put them into the army and put them to serve in the military and everything. And, parents began to get scared. They started sending their kids in planes to the United States to this refugee kind of place that was being led by the Catholic Church at the time. And a lot of these kids were being sent to the United States. Some of them were, eventually being reunited with their families later on, and some of them never got to see their families again. So this is a very, powerful, heart-wrenching story of, again, our main character, Lucia, and her brother, who gets sent to the United States without their parents, and not knowing if they're ever going to see them again, and the things that kind of take place as they're, coming to the United States on their own, experiencing everything, being put into foster care and everything. And this is a powerful, powerful novel. I read this one, I think it was almost in one sitting. I absolutely love it. Highly recommend it. Again, it's a middle grade novel, so this is one that a lot of people can read within 1 or 2 sittings, and it's highly, highly recommended. And the next book on this list of favorites is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This is a recent read for me. I actually read this one, I believe it was last year, and absolutely loved it. Had to make it on my list of favorites of all time ever since I read it because I thought it was absolutely amazing. It follows our main character, Lydia, and at the beginning of this novel, Lydia has passed away. She has committed suicide, and you're kind of going into the past and kind of reliving Lydia's life, all of the events that happened, that made her kind of eventually take this decision to take her own life. You have kind of everything that's going on with her family. There's, this broken family unit and this kind of dark past that exists within these characters. All of the things that were, again, happening that kind of led up to Lydia making this decision. And I thought this book was absolutely beautiful. I loved it. This is another one that I want to reread at some point, but because I just read it last year, I don't want to try and reread it anytime this year again. I don't think this is a book that I want to try and revisit this year, but just because it was a little bit on the heavier side. But one that I definitely want to try and revisit. I absolutely loved this one. I don't know what else to say. I highly recommend this one as well. And then the last book on this list, I do have a small pile of honorable mentions that I have on here as well, but the last book on this kind of official list of all-time favorites is Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. This is probably my favorite contemporary that's out there. I believe this is considered more new adult than YA. It follows our main character Pablo, who works at a kind of convenience store at a bodega, and he is visited one day by this super popular pop star who comes into the bodega. They kind of spark up a little bit of a friendship and a relationship, and then they somewhat fall in love. So it kind of tells the story of their relationship, kind of a very complicated relationship, obviously, as you have, Pablo, who's kind of a normal guy who just kind of, goes to college, has a lot of debt, works in a bodega, kind of falling in love with, the biggest pop star on the planet at this point. And then the complicated relationship that comes with all of these nuances of this very big imbalance that exists within this relationship. I thought it was great. I absolutely love the writing style. I love Pablo's voice in this one. Literally from page 1, I knew I was going to enjoy this main character and his thought process and everything that was going on in his head. I absolutely adored this one. This is one that I feel like, falls under the radar for a lot of people, but I absolutely adored this one. Again, I highly recommend you guys checking this one out. I mean, it goes without saying, I highly recommend all of these books because they're all-time favorites. And then very quickly, moving on to some honorable mentions, I have Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty, a multiple perspective adult mystery that you're trying to figure out not only who murdered the person that was murdered, but also who was murdered. At the beginning, you don't really know. You know that there's a murder, but you don't know who died or who committed the crime. So you're going through this novel within these multiple perspectives of these messed up women in California who, you're trying to figure out what happens. Again, I loved this one because of the different characters and their backgrounds and the writing. I thought this was absolutely hilarious at times, but super dark at other times. You know, there's a lot of, again, trigger warnings in here for domestic abuse and that kind of thing as well. But I thought this was a great, great mystery. I loved how it was written out and how it played out. It was definitely very unique for when I read it, and just had to make it on this list, at least as an honorable mention. Next honorable mention is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sainz. It follows our main characters, Aristotle and Dante, as they, you know, kindle this friendship during the summertime throughout the years, as they kind of, you know, fall apart a little bit and then come back together. It's just absolutely beautiful. I loved the family dynamics within this one, and just loved this story overall. I think Aristotle and Dante are two great, great main characters, and another YA contemporary that I'd recommend as well. Then we have A World Without You by Beth Revis. It follows our main character, Beau, who is sent to an institution for gifted kids. At least he thinks he's going to an institution for gifted children. He believes that it's kind of an institution for kids who have these abilities, so like X-Men type children. But in the, you know, there's underlying themes in there. Obviously, you're kind of going back and forth within, you know, thinking that he really does have this ability, or whether he has kind of a mental disability that he is trying to cope with and doesn't really understand. Another absolutely beautiful story. When I read it, I thought it was absolutely beautiful. This is another one that I feel is hit or miss with a lot of people, but I absolutely ended up adoring this story, the writing style, and everything overall. And another one that at least had to make my honorable mentions. Then we have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, another one that I've mentioned a couple of times, but one that this novel just makes me so happy. Follows our main character, Kath, and her twin sister as they go off to college. Kath is a little bit of an outcast, and she writes fan fiction in her blog for this like Harry Potter type series in this world. And just everything that's happening as they're kind of growing accustomed to being in college, being new college students and everything. And again, this is one that just, it makes me so happy. At the end of me reading this book, I just wanted to go right back and revisit this entire story again. Another one that I've been wanting to reread for the longest time, but have not yet. So hopefully at some point, maybe this summer, I'll end up just picking it up again and rereading through this one, because this novel just makes me smile. And then the last novel on this list is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This follows our two main characters, Noah and Jude, who are twins, and they kind of have a falling apart. It follows two different timelines, one in the present where they're not speaking to each other, and then 2 years prior to when they were, and then all of the events that happened to get to the point where they're not speaking to each other anymore. I thought this was an absolutely beautiful, beautiful novel, another YA contemporary that I highly, highly recommend. Some hard-hitting topics in here, but another one that's just, that it's beautiful. I absolutely loved this novel and would definitely reread this one and recommend it again. So yeah guys, that is it for my list of quite lengthy favorite books of all time, but these are all books that I highly recommend. Again, I keep saying it throughout this video, I highly recommend all of these books. These are all books that I would reread at some point. These are all books that I feel like I would enjoy upon reread again. And I will continue to recommend to anybody. As you guys have seen, I have multiple genres in here, so anytime somebody kind of asks me for some kind of recommendation, I have something in some kind of genre that I can recommend. So yeah, I mean, let me know down below if any of these books made it onto your list of all-time favorite, what some of your guys' all-time favorite books are. I would absolutely love to know. Before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you guys all again for watching, and I will see you all next time.